Hey guys, so my name's Mark Thompson. I'm the Director of Fundraising for the Australian Sports Foundation. Just a brief background on myself. I've sort of spent some time across all levels of sport in Australia. I've run some community sports organisations, semi-pro teams, and sort of been the head of commercial for a Super Rugby side, and spent 3 years as the National Head of Fundraising and Marketing for St Vincent de Paul. And now I've come back into the sports area to combine both my sort of commercialisation around sport and fundraising into a role which is kind of a new sort of avenue for sport, which is fundraising within sport. Jamie's been with the ASF 12 years, which is a long time, and has kind of sort of been with us right through our whole transition of late. And so she's our Victoria-based sports partnership manager. So anyone in the room here that wants to sort of continue on the fundraising journey, Jamie will be your contact, and you'll hear plenty of her tonight. So first and foremost, who's heard of the ASF before Chris sent some stuff out? Cool. One person? Awesome. So the Australian Sports Foundation was established 30 years ago by the government to enable people to make donations to sport and get a tax deduction, no different to if you donate to charity. Sport isn't a charitable purpose, so you generally can't make a donation to sport and get a tax deduction. But obviously sport has got many benefits outside of what you see on the telly and stuff, and at the community level it's more about that social inclusion and health and all of that sort of stuff, and it's definitely a purpose which is good for people and good for community. So in their wisdom, the government created us. Over the past 2 years, we've really undergone a massive transformation. We were sort of a government-run agency, and about 2 years ago we transformed how we operated and separated ourselves from the government, and now we are a much more consultative. We've got people on the ground literally face-to-face helping people raise money for sport. So things like tonight with the workshops, contact with individuals within our organisation, and we've got plenty of resources available to you all, so that this isn't just a sort of a hit and run type effort from us. It's a sustained effort to help all areas of Australia raise money for sport. So how the ASF works, why people donate, the size of the fundraising market. We've got a snapshot of our last 12 months over who raises money and where the money comes from, which will sort of open your eyes that it really is at your level that the opportunity exists. Some case studies, and then and what next, how to go forward from there is what we'll cover tonight. So first and foremost, the ASF is basically a mediatory for the collection of the donations. We are the deductible gift recipient, so donors make the donation to us. They nominate a purpose or a club that they'd like the money to go to, and then we grant that money to the club. So the donors are making the donation to us, get their tax deduction, and then we provide the money onto the club they want it to go to as a grant. So essentially you guys register projects with the ASF, you send out information to your donors and whatnot, and then they make the donation nominating your organisation, and then the money comes back to you. Obviously all donations are then tax deductible, so no different to donating to a charity, which is a really good carrot for donors. The big changes we've made is what type of projects can work with us. So we've broadened our scope in that we were created 30 years ago to raise money for the development of sport, and that's a really broad remit. Over time that sort of narrowed under certain silos, but we've really scraped that back now, and now it literally is anything that helps you develop sport. So that can be things like facilities, it can be team travel, it can be equipment, it can be coaching, it can be sports science, sports medicine, participation initiatives, or even just using sport to impact social change on in needy areas and stuff like that. So it's really a broad remit that you guys can raise money for, and any donations are then tax deductible. And then another area that you guys would all be eligible for and interested in is our Giving for Grassroots program. So it's a grant program we run. We run 2 grant programs per year of between $2.5 grand and $10 grand per grant, and we give away between 150 and 200 grand per round to organisations that have got programs that are helping to increase participation amongst youth. So last grant round we granted 21 organisations from around Australia, and the average grant was about 4 grand, and which is meaningful amounts of money. So keep an eye on that. Our next grant round will actually be in about March next year, I think, isn't it? Yeah. So the size of the philanthropy market, I mean, this is important because it sort of starts to put a focus on the opportunity that lays ahead of sport. So the last giving statistics that the ATO have released to date are 2012. Back then, 35% of all Australians made a tax-deductible donation. About $2.5 billion was donated by individuals to a certain purpose, but only 1% of that was given to sport. Like, that's a tiny percentage of donations that went to sport. When you consider the sort of the role that sports play in Australian society, there really is a massive upside here. If you can compare that to the arts, and the arts have a sister organisation to the Australian Sports Foundation, and they were created around the same time, but they've done a really good job in creating a need and telling their story as being the poor cousin to everyone in Australia. And they raise 150 million a year compared to the 20 million a year that the sport raises. So that's almost 8%, and they're growing at 10% a year. Now, in the last 2 years, sport has grown at sort of 30 and 40% a year in terms of the amount of donations coming through. So we're quickly catching up, and the time is now to actually jump on to this sort of avenue. It's a private ancillary or public ancillary fund. So it's like a trust or foundation that you might hear of, the Lord Mayor's Charitable Trust or people like that. They're what they call PAFs. So they are a special purpose vehicle designed to give money to charitable purposes, basically. So why do people give? So across the sort of 9 key pillars of charity, 5 of those really do apply to sport, around why people make donations. So the most compelling reason people give is because they think it's a good cause. Now, no one in this room is going to argue against sport being a good cause. The second most is that they respect the work that you do, and most of you guys here, or all of you here, will be volunteers, I'm assuming. So that's people within your clubs and your communities definitely respect the work you guys all do. Sympathy is the third most, and that's kind of like, we need the money, and we're working really hard, where people feel like they need to give you the money. Number 4, fourth most is trust. So they trust you. They've spent a lot of their life involved in your sporting club, and so you've built a lot of trust over generations. There's probably nothing more in society in Australia that people trust more than sport. Like it literally is in your blood. When you're born with a footy jersey on, or a club you support and stuff, because it's sort of, most people, just love their sport. I mean, I don't go to many meetings where I sit down and talk about the opera, right? You're always talking about, who won the Ashes or the recent footy grand final or something like that. And then the 5th most reason is obligation. So, people feel obliged to give, and this is the sort of the area that sport really doesn't really like to lean on. It feels a little bit uncomfortable asking people who are really already involved with your organisation, and that's what we'll work on today. But as you can see, 3/4 of the reasons people make donations to charity are directly aligned to sport. Like, sport has the ability to raise a lot of money if it's done properly. So the 5 key reasons that people donate to sport: obviously cultural. Australia, sport's probably our number 1 cultural activity. Health, sport, especially at the grassroots level, plays a massive role in the health of our future generations. And it's really concerning that a third of all of our kids are obese. 80% of Australian children don't meet the recommended standards of activity in their lives, like in their lifestyle. That's a huge concern going forward for future generations, and sport becoming more accessible that's the only way that's going to change, because the barriers to participate in sport are the reasons those numbers are where they are. The social inclusion elements of sport that play in society, you know, sport is a really good way that people can sort of integrate within their own community. Economic factors are really undervalued of what sport plays in a community. I think there was a research study in Victoria around AFL clubs, and the findings came out that for every $1 spent in an AFL club returned a $4 return to the community in economic wise. So, you know, for every $1 somebody spent at a sausage sizzle, that returned $4 in terms of, like, you know, your purchase of your sausages off the local butcher, your sauces, your bread, all of that sort of stuff. Sport invests back into community just to exist. And then your emotional sort of connection. People, you know, if they're attached to their sporting club, they've got an emotional tie to something. Sport gives people a purpose. You know, no matter how old they are, there's people out here rolling up out here before, you know, in their 80s. It's something that they enjoy to do. It gives them something to sort of live for. So Jamie's just going to run through our snapshot, which gives you guys a bit of a background of how fundraising went for last year around.
So as Mark said, we produced this snapshot basically as a way of helping sport to fundraise, bringing more money into sport and helping sport be better fundraisers into the future. So there's a few key things. It looks at basically the who, what, when, where, why of giving in sport. So you'll notice there's a copy of this snapshot on your chairs there. It's also available on our website for you to have a look at. But there's a few key things that we identified. Basically, donations increased quite significantly in the last financial year. They went from $17 million to $24 million. So that's, you know, almost a 25% rise. We've identified that this is directly related to improvements to technologies. So we've got an online donation platform now, and as Mark sort of referenced before, we've really broadened the scope of what sport can fundraise for now. You're not limited to these specific projects. It's anything that you do. But so by opening that up to sport, it's really tapped into donors and what they want to support, and that they felt more comfortable giving. So that's been really great. We work with almost 60 sports, it's over 600 organisations and 800 projects. That's a lot for a small team, but it's a drop in the ocean, you know, compared to what we could be doing. So we're excited about the future. And the donation trends, this graph here, we've identified a few peaks within that. So April and October, there's a small peak there that can be directly related to membership, the start and end of seasons. So it sort of goes to show that organisations are integrating fundraising within their existing communication channels through their memberships, which I'll talk more about further on. And June is by far and away our biggest month for donations, being end of financial year. Last financial year we took in over 40% of our annual donations in the last 2 weeks in June. So tax deductibility does matter to donors. So we're hoping, this was a general snapshot. We're hoping to produce a grassroots specific snapshot that'll be available hopefully at the start of next year. So that'll be really meaningful for you guys as well, to identify trends within, you know, sort of grassroots sports fundraising.
Just drop back. So the other really important statistic there is the 47%. So 47% of all donations that come through us are between $0 and $50. So that's a really important statistic for grassroots sport, because it breaks down that perception that fundraising is only for the rich. And it's actually not. It's the mums and dads that are giving money. It's the ones that really care because they want their kids to have the experience that they had growing up. And zero to $50 is affordable for anyone. Anything over $2 is tax deductible. So a lot of donations coming through at that sort of $10, $20 range, which is, we'll actually show you a case study later, which is a real grassroots case study, which helped them achieve something that lasted through the whole season.
Yeah, good point.
40% of the number of donations, or 40% of the 21 million?
Dollars was in June. So it's a busy time for us, as you can imagine. So that we work with all types of organisations from at all different levels. So we work with national sporting organisations like Tennis and Netball Australia. We work with professional clubs like Carlton Football Club. We work with local government. Wellington Shire Council have a hockey facility project registered with us, and of course grassroots clubs of all different sports and schools, anything you can think of, we work with them. So whatever's meaningful for those organisations, it's all relative. Rightio. So there are a few key principles of fundraising that we've identified, and hopefully we can give you some tips for moving forward. But probably the most important thing is that fundraising can't be a side element. It just can't be sitting off on the side. Everyone within the organisation has to buy into to what you're looking to fundraise for. Everyone needs to be on board, or it's not going to work. So there are a few sort of key things that successful fundraising strategies address. The goal, again, everyone within the organisation needs to know what you're fundraising for, needs to know your fundraising goals, so they can communicate that amongst supporters, membership, and whatnot. So you need to know what you're looking to achieve. The target audience. Sport has a really big advantage over every other general charity out there, in that you've already got people who are passionate about your club, your sport. They're already engaged, and that's what a lot of other charities out there are striving for. You've already got this. You've got people who are loyal, they're already engaged, so they want to be part of what you're doing. The story and the message, you're going to hear this a few times throughout this talk, but this is the most important thing when you're developing a fundraising strategy. It needs to make people care. You need to engage them, and you need to give them the opportunity to help. As I say, they're already engaged with what you're doing. They're passionate about the club, and they want an opportunity to help. So it's up to you guys as fundraisers to show them how they can do that, which we'll talk a bit more about a bit later. The available resources, this is also an important one. It's no use sort of developing this multifaceted, detailed fundraising plan if you don't have the resources or the people on board to carry it forward. Otherwise it's going to sit on a shelf and it won't be successful. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. And the mechanisms. You don't need to create new ways of communicating with your donors, and it's something that we, and best practice is certainly to integrate your fundraising within your existing communication channels, like your social media, like your newsletters, and all that sort of thing. You don't want to reinvent the wheel. You don't want to overload your members with communications. So that's a really great way to make it easier for you guys. And for the members as well. So building the story, as I've said, this is the most important consideration when you're fundraising, is your story. There's 4 key things that we've identified, being the need, the cause, the impact, and the ask. So the need is basically, you need to be specific. How much do you need to fundraise? For example, $50,000. We need to fundraise $50,000. That's our target. Everyone's on the same page that that's your target. And the cause. The cause is exactly why is the money needed? What are you going to use it for? So we need $50,000 to build some new lights on the Oval. That's, it's clear, concise. Everyone's on the same page about what you need, what it's needed for. Impact is probably the most important thing. What is this going to mean for your club? What difference is it going to make? for example, using the $50,000 for the lights. Having the new lights does mean we're going to be able to train at night. We can get more kids playing, more teams playing. We can play night games. That's going to bring more money into the club. So that's obviously going to benefit the club in a lot of ways. The ask. You need to ask. You need to let your members know and your supporters know how can they help. What do you need them to do? Do you need them to make a donation? Do you need to make them, be advocates for what you're fundraising for, your project? You need to ask. And a story basically needs to be engaging. It needs to demonstrate change, and you should make it pretty. Use imagery, pictures, infographics, video, whatever it may be, to engage your audience. So we've gone through the first part of a campaign, which is aimed at getting the first donation of your members or your supporters, and that's really important. But what's just as important is actually trying to get people to donate again. So keeping them engaged with what you're doing, showing them the impact that they've made, and they're more willing to contribute again because they trust in what you're doing. So they trust that you're using their money wisely, and they're happy to hand it over again. So the donor return is something that we consider. So we're not talking about anything material here. It's more about communicating the impact, as I said, of the difference that they've made individually to what you're doing. Also the project plan, as I mentioned before, integrate this, make fundraising part of your everyday activities, like your registrations, like your presentation nights, your social media, your newsletters, all that sort of thing. You don't need to ask members to donate every time you're communicating with them, and in fact we don't recommend that at all, but you should keep them engaged, as I say, with what you're doing, how the project is progressing, and our suggestion is every 5 times you're communicating with your members, ask once for a donation. That way they don't feel like you're hitting them up every time you're communicating with them for a donation. The impact and the outcomes, we have touched on this, but use case studies and photos to prove to donors that what they're giving is making a difference to the club and to the project and the community, really. And also the culture and the resources and the governance. As I said, there needs to be a buy-in across the organisation, from your president, your coach, your players, your members. Everyone needs to be on board with what you're fundraising for and feel comfortable about going out to members and bringing them in and making them part of what you're doing. So just to sum up, the keys to a successful fundraising campaign, the story, I keep ramming that home, but the story is really impactful and something that we can help you with to develop your story. Focus on the assets that you've got. Have to ask. We've actually had a pretty high-profile national sporting organisation who had a high net worth event where they had some really wealthy people in the room. Everyone knew what they were there for. Had the CEO talking about the impact that it's going to make. They had some video footage about with little kids playing, and this is wonderful. This is wonderful. And then the CEO got up and apologised for not for wasting everyone's time, but apologised for running late and said to people, you know what to do. So he didn't really make it clear about what he wanted, and they walked away with no donations from that event. So it's an example of, even if you've done everything right up until that point, if you don't ask, people don't know what to do. They want to, as I say, they want to be part of what you're doing. They want to help. You just need to provide them with the opportunity to do that. And communicating with your donors, keeping them engaged, and communicating the impact. So that's probably the most important things when you're developing your campaign. So Mark will go into, we've got a lot of great case studies. These are just a few that we've picked out that we think could relate to your situations and just show how achievable things are.
Thanks, Jamie. So just more on the event that the CEO didn't actually ask. The kicker for that is that one of the donors came up to us after the event and said, I had a whole table of people that came here to give money and now we don't know what to do. A week later they went to a different sport and between them they donated 700 grand. So that's just by not asking, that sport lost 700,000 bucks. So it sort of rams home, you've just got to let them know what you want them to do. They didn't know whether donating that much money would be not enough and they'd feel inadequate or what. So, but sort of more at the community level, there's a couple of really good examples of what's been working well. So, and these actually represent different types of fundraising campaigns, which is also sort of lends itself to that using your resources wisely, what capabilities your organisation have and skill sets your people and volunteers and committee have to be able to actually execute a fundraising campaign. So the American River Progress Association, they needed just over 23 grand to refurbish some tennis courts. So what they did was they obviously communicated with their members regularly via EDM, so it was something they already did. So what they integrated their fundraising within their email sort of campaign, and they told their story and they built some advocacy, and then they created a level of engagement that people were actually anticipating sort of how can we help them. So we've got something great coming up here, and so they then timed it and they introduced an ask with a tiered sort of response so that everybody could have an opportunity to be involved, and you know, whether you donated at a bronze level or a platinum level, that was okay. That the amount you donated wasn't really the issue. It was just giving everyone the chance to donate. And it was a really successful campaign. They acknowledged all their donors by an honour board in the clubhouse. So there's a bit of a legacy for those people, something to be proud of. So future generations of their family will be able to go in and see that, you know, their parents had helped build the club. You know, it's that sort of signifies, you know, the old brick in the wall type sort of signification. And they raised their money, and it was quite a simple campaign, using their resources well, telling their story well, and giving people the opportunity to help. And that's kind of the key, is that because sports, people that are members of clubs are so engaged and sort of rusted on to their sport, creating, it's not begging, it's not asking, it's just giving them an opportunity to help in a meaningful way. And what you'll find when you get into this space really well is that people are willing to help, they just don't know how. And you know, they don't know whether volunteering is what you want from them, giving money is what you want from them, helping spread the word is what you want from them. And the ask can be any of those things. It's just actually sort of figuring out as an organisation what you most need. And a footy club in the ACT, you know, their need was really small, that $4,000, but it was for a really important thing. They needed some footballs to allow the kids to train during the year. They didn't have any. They'd lost them in the off season, and so they needed to raise $4,000 to buy a full kit of balls for their club for the kids to be able to use at training. So they had a Rego Day where people came and registered, as you guys would all be aware of. They asked every single person that registered to make a voluntary donation of $25, tax deductible. If people didn't want to make a donation, that's fine. There wasn't any sort of negative backlash on those people. But it was, they explained that, you know, $25 donation will help us get some footballs so that the kids can train during the year. And obviously that's a fairly important, you know, part of playing footy, is that you have balls. So most parents understood the need and made the donation. They raised $4,000 in that day. They didn't embark on fundraising again that year. They didn't have the resources to do it. But on that day, they focused their need. They told their story. They raised their money, and that was it. They didn't sort of move on and try and stretch themselves unnecessarily through the year. But they had that. And now every time they have a Rego Day, they raise money. And year on year, that builds more and more, because more and more people give, because they can see the change that made. And then this is kind of like the biggest, you sort of grassroots type fundraising program we run, the Kooyong Lawn Tennis Club. Now it's obviously quite an elite tennis club, but what they've done is they've just had a membership add-on every year. People pay sort of, I think it's $25 or $50 on top of their membership renewals. And so they're not asking for a separate donation outside of when they're already paying their subs. So they're actually including it in the subs. So it's not as imposing that you're paying your subs and then later on you're getting asked for more money. It's sort of all in the one transaction. So it's actually more achievable for people. The difference between paying $50 and $75 isn't as big as $50 and then 2 weeks later asking for $25. It's just one transaction. But over 12 years of running that, they've raised $700 grand for their club. Like, that's huge for a grassroots sporting club. And it goes towards junior scholarships and to run their tournaments. So, you can sort of just do the maths there. That's just shy of about sort of $70K a year that they're raising just through membership add-ons. And that's sort of built year on year. And one statistic that fundraising, and you can lean on it, is that whatever you raise in year one, if you continue to do it and you recognise your donors and you make them feel appreciated, by year 3 that will have doubled, and by year 5 that will double again. It really is a long-term solution, but 5 years' time your club could have a real diverse revenue stream here in fundraising, and you don't have to worry about going to your local shops to donate to give you some sponsorship, or running sausage sizzles which cost more than they yield sometimes. It's a real different stream, and even a new thing that we're about to launch actually is your kids get selected in rep teams, and they to go and represent Victoria or your region or whatever, and they've got to sell chocolates or raffle tickets and stuff like that, and that's just, I'm a parent and that's just a massive pain in my butt. And the fundraising can be used at that level. So you can, as a club, you can do tax-deductible fundraising to support your kids that get selected in teams, and they don't have to worry about their raffle tickets and chocolate drives. They can just go out and ask for people to donate because it's going to help them achieve their dream of representing their state or country or region or whatever, and it's just as impactful. But what we do know is tax-deductible fundraising, the average gift is about $34, and the average amount that you raise when you're selling raffle tickets is $5. So you're losing out on $29 just by taking the easy road of selling a raffle ticket. So next steps, that's sort of our snapshot of how to get started in fundraising, I guess. Next steps from here are for you guys to have a bit of a think about what you would want to fundraise for. You've got to have a specific purpose. You can't just go, we want to fundraise for our club. I haven't met a sports club in Australia that has enough money. What you've got to do is go, well, we need new kit, or we want to send our under 12s on a tour, which is a life-changing experience, or something that's really impactful and really sexy for people to want to give money to. You've got to have buy-in from your committee and board. Like, there's no point just wanting to just go and run this if the people that hold influence in your club aren't supporting it. It's got to have buy-in from the top down. Have a look at the resources you've got and weight your fundraising expectations off that. Like, if you've got really good resources and you've got really skilled board that are really involved and want to get their hands dirty, then you can probably be a little bit more ambitious. But if there's only one person on your committee that's willing to take this on and run with it, then don't be unrealistic. Start small and build from there. If you can answer all those questions where you've got someone that wants to run it, you've got a buy-in and you've got a need, then that's the time to register with the ASF, and you can just do that through our website, or you can contact Jamie, and Jamie can help you through that process. It's quite simple. It's just an online form. You register. It doesn't cost you anything to register, and then you're off and racing. Right throughout the whole process, though, as I said earlier on, we are here to help fundraisers. Like, we're not here to just sort of for you to set up like a GoFundraise or a crowdsourcing platform. Where actually you get that type of stuff through our website anyway, with your thermometers and your own little web page and stuff like that. But you also get advice from us. You got Jamie you can speak to anytime you need. We've got there's 8 videos currently on our website around how to fundraise, and they're all sort of 3 to 4 minutes each. covering a specific topic. They're all me, unfortunately, sorry. I'm filming more in December on major gift fundraising, so how to actually ask for a major gift. And major gifts aren't, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars necessarily. $1,000 might be major for you guys, but how to ask for a major gift. So it's like how to go to a wealthy person and ask for money, which is a real skill. And when in December, we'll be releasing 6 videos along those lines. And those sorts of resources, plus Jamie, that'll help you build a strategy. You guys don't have to sort of take this on all yourself. It can be quite daunting because it's so new. So lean on us and really ask us for help, and you know, together we'll get you there. And then, you know, it's up to, then you just got to execute. You got to follow your plan.
So do you also have people that can provide advice on how to develop the project?
Yeah, if you've got some ideas and you're not quite sure how to sort of materialise those, then that's what Jamie's here for as well. Like, so we got, as we said earlier, we've got 800 projects across the country, so quite a wide range of different things people are raising money for. And it may be that somebody in Western Australia have a really similar, you know, need and demographic and everything to you guys, and we can draw on the experience we've learnt from them and actually give you that sort of advice on what they've done well and how you guys can apply that. So, I mean, a good example is the Albury Wodonga Council are building a facility which is really similar to a facility being built in Coburn, Western Australia, like almost identical. And so, two different parts of the country, very similar demographics. So we've put those guys in touch, and they're now working with each other to help each other, you know, learn off each other to get their projects working together. So that kind of connection is also available through us.
So with the establishing, like putting the project together,
Yep.
what sort of information, other than just registering the project online, is there an online form that people allow to add attachments to with your quotes and your plans and doing a facility?
No, we've really streamlined that process. So that was something in the past that we would have asked for. So the initial registration is just registering your organisation with us. So it'll just ask some general questions about the organisation, your general fundraising needs, and that allows us to draw up an agreement between us. The agreement isn't project specific at all. So that means that it covers anything that develops sport in Australia, you'll be able to collect donations for. We then have the ability to set up specific projects or campaigns, and you can do that easily through the portal, and that'll ask some project specific questions, like if it's a facility project, who's the landowner, do you have landowner consent, you know, what's your fundraising target, all that sort of thing. Yeah, so the project specific questions come along when you do add your specific projects and campaigns.
Is there a cost?
There's no cost to register. We used to have a $275 application fee, so as part of the restructure we abolished that because we want to encourage as many organisations to fundraise as possible. There is a 5% retention of donations that came in as of 1 July. We no longer receive any government funding, so we're self-sufficient now, so there is a 5% retention on donations. But what we say to that is make us work for that 5%. Think of us as an extension of your fundraising team. That's that's how you should look at it.
Normally I say make them work for it. But,
I've got a
yeah.
question around, there's lots of crowdfunding sites out there, and
Yeah.
there seems to be a new one each
Absolutely.
week.
Yeah.
With some of them, they allow for, within your project, to actually have different levels that people can donate. So, for instance, donate, get a scarf, so they get something for their donation.
Yeah.
Is that
Nah, so that sort of negates the tax deductible bit. Like you can't use anything as a lure. Like tax.
To be a straight donation.
Yeah, to be tax deductible, it's got to be like totally voluntary, you know, and they receive no material benefit. So the lure is the tax deduction.
Yeah.
right? So the greater, the bigger the gift, the bigger the deduction they get. They can go and buy us 50 scarves if they donate enough. But what we provide is that kind of crowdsourcing platform, but it's tax deductible crowdsourcing effectively, where you can have your projects. It integrates from our website through social media. You can put thermometers on your page, all that sort of stuff that those platforms offer, except we provide the resources. We provide the tax deductibility. We provide the technology, and we're cheaper than all of them as well. Like they charging sort of 7 to 11%, for donations, and their method is they're there to raise money for themselves, whereas sort of we're around to raise money for sport. So the 5% is just built in because that's what will cover our costs if we maintain our level of donations.
You mentioned earlier, I'm involved with a project that's just started through my grassroots soccer club where we need $70,000 for the lighting project, which is $240,000. And the committee's not confused, but there's so many different ways.
Oh, absolutely.
Would your advice be, like, if you wanted to do a crowdfunding thing where, you're perhaps offering potential donors or members, buy a scarf and, it's $50 and you get a scarf, but have this as separate?
Look,
Is that too confusing?
it is too confusing. I also would say if they're willing to pay $50 for a scarf, they're willing to give you a $50 donation and get a tax deduction. The scarf doesn't mean anything. The scarf is, just a material piece that they're interested in because they want to give money to help the lights, right? Like fundraising essentially is self-serving because they're donating for the lights because they want lights for themselves so they can play soccer at night time and their kids can play at night time, right? So it's kind of getting your head out of that. You've got to, like that sponsorship space where you've got to give something to get something. You don't actually need to. What you're giving them is a better experience. Some longevity in their time with sport. And how I would focus your thinking is what resources have you got? Like what skills have you got within your club that you can use really well? So do people have good networks? Are there people willing to put time in? And how do you already communicate with your members and stuff like that? So if you don't have a good social media following or a good website, then don't fundraise through those channels. If all of your communication are face-to-face with your members, then do your fundraising face-to-face with your members. So how you already speak to people is how you should fundraise as well. So it should just be totally integrated with your current practices, is basically what we're saying. What I will say as well is don't expect to just put a donate button on your website and raise the money. Like you've got to tell the story, you've got to build advocacy, which is kind of what Jamie was saying before is you've got to engage with these people 5 times on average before you can ask them if you expect a return. So you've got to build that anticipation, build the need, build the impact, and then it's a how can I help rather than they're asking me for money.
So a couple of questions. One, if you haven't got a website or a Facebook page, obviously the donate button doesn't work. So how do people make a donation? Do they have to go into your website to do that?
They can.
Yeah.
Do you provide a bank account details?
Yep.
for people
We
to
can have a manual.
use that?
Yeah, so we'll provide you with a manual donation form as well as the online donation platform because there are still people out there who are not comfortable donating online.
Yep.
They like to fill out a form and that's absolutely fine. So we do facilitate that and that's part of what we'll provide you on registration.
And you can use our website with our URL as your own little fundraising website as well.
So, and nowadays you donate directly to the project rather than just a donation?
So you
So
can,
in the past, you
yeah.
would just donate to the government, and the government would just allocate it to a project, but now you can actually nominate your project to be
So-
donated to.
Yeah.
so with us, you've always been able to nominate a project.
There was no guarantee that.
There can't be a
There's
guarantee.
still
So under
yeah.
tax law, that's not our rules. Under
So
tax,
it's still the case?
that's
It's a tax,
in
yeah.
100% of cases in 30 years, we've given the money to the nominated clause. It's called a donor advised model. It's okay under tax law, but you can't have tied donations. It's not voluntary and untied, unconditional, which it's just the tax deductible law. But out of the hundreds of thousands of donations was received over the years, every single one of them has gone to the nominated cause.
And do you just get the money once you've raised it? You don't
No.
get them in stages?
Every 2 months we do a grant round. So whatever you've raised within that period of time will be granted back. There's a couple of exceptions, like for facility projects, if you haven't got approval yet but you're fundraising for it, if you haven't got your council approvals and stuff, then we will hold on to the money until you get the approvals. It doesn't have to be complete. As soon as the approvals are got, you then can access your money. Yep.
So do you post out the receipt to the people who've donated?
So
We
we'll
email.
Yeah, so if they
But
provide,
if they haven't got email?
if they haven't got an email, yeah, absolutely, we'll post it. But we'll also provide you with a summary of the donations that have been
But
received.
they'll want it for their account.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we take care of all that administration, but we keep you in the loop with who's donated through the donation reports that come out weekly and monthly.
Yep.
So if I went into the project I wanted to donate to, and I wanted to donate $50,
Yes.
is it simple as just putting my credit card, $50?
You get a receipt straight away
Yeah.
if it's online.
There's no PayPal
So-
set up where
Not at
I
the
don't have PayPal.
We use eWay, like it's just a payment, a secure portal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as the user, I don't have to register.
No.
with-
No, not at all.
It's just-
Not at all. So
Yeah.
it's credit
Just my
card
credit
or
card.
direct deposit. Yeah.
Yep. And the direct debit is like it's like the old form where people may not have wanted to use their credit card. You can choose direct debit. You get an email. You got basically 2 weeks to make the donation on the details that come in that email, and then it's acquitted back against that online donation and reported back to the club. Yep. Any other questions?
Okay.
No? We're done.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.